What's up, folks? This is Justin from Books, Bricks, and Boards. In the last Solo RPG 101 video I did, I talked about choosing the right GM emulator for your solo RPG games.
It worked.
And while that is the first step, another crucial part of the process is going to be learning how to interpret the oracles in those emulators. That is the number one thing that a GM emulator is doing, is providing oracles to give you answers to the questions you would normally ask a GM. When I started doing solo RPGs, that was also the hardest part about making the transition, because that's a skill that you don't develop while playing a standard RPG, and you certainly don't develop it by playing other types of games. So today, I'm going to give my top 10 tips for interpreting your GM emulator oracles. Let's get into it.
You will learn by the numbers. I will teach you.
So to start this video off, I want to talk about the two main different types of oracles that you're going to be utilizing regularly in these games. First are going to be the yes-no oracles. That's where you're trying to ask a question of the GM and find out if this is true or not. And those are going to be used sparingly, but for very important questions. The second type are contextual oracles. Those are going to be generating usually two words and interpreting what they might mean in the organic situation to try to create the unexpected in your solo RPG games. But that being said and out of the way, we're going to start off. My first three tips are going to be with the yes-no oracles. Now, before I even get into my tips with the yes-no oracles, I'm going to give you a free way to use your own yes-no oracle without any books, without any cards, without any special tools whatsoever. Most yes-no oracles are simply probability calculators disguised as a question. While all games have them, a simple solution is, when you have a yes-no question, roll a die, any die. If the roll is in the upper half, the answer is yes.
Yes!
If it's in the lower half, the answer is no.
No!
The closer to the middle the roll, the more gray the result.
Yes, but actually no.
Yes, but you have this setback, or no, but this bit worked in your favor. When you get out closer to the ends of the range, the answers become more yes, and you also get this, or no, and this bad thing also happened.
What, this gets worse? Come on.
You could use a D6, a D8, a D12, a D20, any die that you want. The one thing being common is that if you use a larger die, you're going to get a little bit more variation. So if you want to be able to delineate the degrees a little bit more, use a bigger die. But it's perfectly acceptable just to roll a 6-sided die. For example, here's an 8-sided roll, and we're going to say, is the prison cell guarded currently? 1. That is a strong no. So no, and maybe they left the keys hanging right on the wall beside the cell. Tip number 1. Yes-no questions should be asked in a way that assumes yes is driving the action forward. For example, is the prison cell guarded? Not, is the prison cell unguarded? This helps you to remember to keep pushing the narrative forward as well. Tip number 2. Adding likelihood into the test can be as easy as defining the probability of a yes as very likely or very unlikely. And in these cases, roll 2 times and keep the higher for very likely or the lower for very unlikely. Adding more dice further pushes the probability in one direction or another. This is very similar to the advantage-disadvantage mechanic from 5e. Tip number 3. Don't ask too many questions. If the answer is obvious or the story has a clear best path, do that. Oracles are great at mimicking a GM in small doses, but the more that you have to use them, the more that they show their cracks in their armor. You can very easily take advantage of the game by asking improbable questions like, does this peasant have a magic sword they'd like to loan me? But if you're trying to game the Oracle, solo RPGs may not be a great choice for you. Your miles may vary. And these last 7 tips are going to be related to the contextual tables, the contextual oracles. So with these, you're typically going to have to choose tables that will have subject action or action theme or elements or so on and so forth. Whenever you roll on these tables, you're going to have to figure out what they mean in your game. So with that said, let's get into some tips related to those. Tip number 4, watch and listen to the greats. Trevor Duvall from Me, Myself, and Die, and Sean Tompkin from Ask the Oracle, or any of the many other great solo RPG creators out there,
It's like people only do things because they get paid.
can give you a much better idea of how you could interpret such results in your game. They usually go into a little bit of explanation as to how they came up with their answer, and that will help give you confidence that you're on the right path. Tip number 5, don't get too literal. Sometimes you roll a result that doesn't make a lot of sense literally, but when you think about the symbolism in the game, it can make a lot of sense metaphorically. For example, when rolling on the Chaos Portents table from Solitary Depths during my recent Pirate Borg solo video, I rolled Die when trying to assign a last name. My mind went to Coffin because it sounded like an ominous last name for a villain, but I could have just as easily called him Ed Clay, thinking of Die as a polyhedral and Andrew Dice Clay. Word association is key, and there's no wrong answer. It's like an RPG version of a Rorschach test, and yours will be different than my own. Tip number 6, just go with it. Don't get bogged down in whether you have the perfect interpretation or not. Generally, your gut reaction to these tables will be as good as anything that you come up with after agonizing, and usually even better. So just keep moving the narrative forward. Tip number 7, don't be afraid to step away. Sometimes I'm just not inspired, and at that point it is pointless to try to force it. If you get hit with that writer's block and you have trouble coming up with a creative response, step away from the table and come back with a fresh head. Tip number 8, mix up your tables. I almost always roll on 2 different contextual tables when playing solo because it sparks the creative process by forcing me to consider how often 2 unrelated words combine to define the scene. Along with that, you're going to want to have some different resources. So here I have the Ironsworn book, Solitary Defilement, and the Mythic Game Master Emulator. I also have Solitary Depths inside that binder. So with that, I have numerous different contextual tables that I can roll from. That being said, if you're just getting started, the ones in Mythic are more than you'll ever need.
Hey, what more can a guy ask for?
There are dozens of contextual tables within there, they're elements tables in particular, that are excellent for this purpose. Number 9. Think about the context. You want to consider how this all relates to what is happening at the table. I can get the same contextual words 5 different times, but if the game scene is different each time, my read of their meaning will also be very different. Tip number 10, creating your own contextual tables. Sometimes it is worthwhile to have specialty contextual tables that you've created yourself that are specific to your own game or world. One of the things that I have done in the past to create such tables is for a name generator, go through a movie related to the type of genre that you're playing in, and you can actually just pull up the credits and look through and pick the first 10 names off of that, and that's your D10 table. You can do that for a D20 as well, but usually 10 is going to be enough. So if you do this and you create your own specialized contextual tables, you're going to have a more customized game, and it's going to better reflect what you want to see in your own game. All right, so that was my video on my top 10 tips for interpreting your new GM Emulator Oracles. Hopefully that gives you some sense of how to get started and helps you build that muscle to be a better solo RPG player. If you did enjoy the content, I would appreciate it if you would give me a like and a subscribe, and I would love to hear your thoughts on some of the tips that you use for better understanding the GM Oracle results in your games. With that being said, this has been Justin from Books, Bricks, and Boards. Good gaming, and God bless.
Well, bye.